They said the ranch was worthless, just a crumbling house, broken fences, and a sway-backed old horse too stubborn to die. When the poorest cowboy in Oak Hollow inherited it, folks laughed, certain he'd been cursed with nothing but dust and debt. But one moonlit night, that same horse pawed the earth and uncovered a secret buried for 40 years, a secret worth $5 million, and one that would drag the cowboy into a battle of blood, betrayal, and destiny. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe. The town of Oak Hollow was the kind of place the world forgot. A dry little dot on the western map, framed by flat prairies and rolling hills that had long since been stripped of promise. The cattle trails that once brought life to its saloons and stockyards were now dusty scars across the land. A few small ranches clung to survival, and the main street, 2 rows of woodfront stores, a post office, and a weathered saloon, bore the weary look of people who worked too hard and expected too little in return. The heat in summer settled like a heavy blanket, and the wind in winter sliced through bone. To most, Oak Hollow was not a place to dream, but a place to endure. Among its residents was Eli Carter. He was a tall, thin man in his late 20s, with the kind of gaunt look that came from too many skipped meals and too many nights sleeping under the stars. His jeans were always worn at the knees, his shirts patched more than once, and the brim of his hat, once proud and stiff, had softened and faded until it looked like it had belonged to his grandfather. He lived mostly on odd jobs, repairing a broken fence for a few coins, cleaning a neighbor's barn, or helping herd cattle when the ranch hands were short. None of it paid much, and more than once he'd been shortchanged with a shrug. People hired him because he was cheap, not because they respected him. Eli carried himself quietly, shoulders slightly hunched, a man who had learned that drawing attention meant drawing scorn. In the saloon, he kept to the far corner table, nursing a single glass of watered-down whiskey until the barkeep grew tired of refilling it. The younger men of the town, full of swagger and the kind of confidence that came from having fathers with money, often tossed their barbs his way. "There he is," one of them would say loud enough for the room to hear. Cowboy Carter, the biggest failure Oak Hollow ever raised. The laughter that followed was sharp, cruel, but Eli rarely looked up. He let their words settle like dust, choosing silence over anger. He would lift the brim of his hat just enough to show his eyes lined with exhaustion, far older than his years. And then he would look away again. Those eyes told their own story of a man who had learned disappointment too young and carried it like a second skin. Life went on this way, day after day, until one stifling afternoon in late summer. Eli was in the back pen of a neighbor's ranch, hammering at a loose plank in the fence. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt, and the air smelled of manure and hot dust. He barely noticed when a rider appeared at the gate, a boy from the post office swinging down from his mule with a satchel. "You're Eli Carter?" the boy asked. Eli pushed the brim of his hat up with the back of his wrist and nodded. "Letter for you?" The boy handed over an envelope, thick and heavy, with the embossed seal of Harold Jenkins, the town's attorney. Eli frowned. The Carter family had long stopped sending him letters. His father, Thomas Carter, had been a man of few words. Even in person and in writing, he had been absent altogether. Eli wiped his hand on his jeans before tearing the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet, neatly typed, "Mr. Eli Carter. We regret to inform you of the passing of your father, Thomas Carter, late of Oak Hollow at the age of 72. You are requested to attend the reading of his last will and testament tomorrow at 3 o'clock in my office. Respectfully, Harold Jenkins, attorney at law." Eli read the letter twice, his throat dry. His father was dead. The old man had lived a long life, longer than Eli would have guessed, though not one spent in warmth or kindness. Thomas Carter had been a strict, unyielding figure, harder on his youngest son than on anyone else. For Eli, the man had never been a source of comfort, only a presence of judgment. He folded the paper back into the envelope and tucked it into his shirt pocket. For a moment, he considered tossing it aside. What could his father have left him? Nothing but debts, most likely. Marcus, his older brother, was the favored one, the heir to the ranching business. Clara, his sister, had charmed her way into Oak Hollow's social circles. Eli had been the afterthought, the shadow. Still, something in him stirred, a mixture of duty and curiosity. He could not ignore the summons, not when it was the last tie to the man who had raised him in stern silence. So he decided he would go, even if he expected nothing. The next day, the heat bore down as Eli walked into town. The office of Harold Jenkins was a narrow building with oak paneling that smelled faintly of polish and old books. A ceiling fan turned lazily overhead, stirring warm air rather than cooling it. The light through the tall windows cast golden squares across the wooden floor. Inside, Marcus Carter was already waiting. He was everything Eli was not, broad-shouldered, well-fed, and dressed in a new leather coat that gleamed in the lamplight. His boots shone from recent polish, and the way he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, suggested a man certain of his position in the world. He glanced at Eli with a smirk. "Well, look who crawled out of the dirt," Marcus drawled. "Didn't think you'd bother showing up." Clara Carter sat beside him, elegant in a tailored dress, her perfume a sharp contrast to the musty office air. She twirled a lace glove between her fingers, casting Eli a dismissive glance. Beside her stood a gentleman in a fine vest, one of her wealthy acquaintances from town, who looked at Eli as though he were a stain on the carpet. Eli felt the weight of their stares, but said nothing. He took a seat on the far side of the table, his hat resting on his knee. His clothes were dusty from the road, and in that polished room, he looked like an intruder. Harold Jenkins, a balding man with round spectacles, cleared his throat and opened a leather folder. "Thank you for coming," he began. "We are gathered to execute the last will and testament of Thomas Carter." He read in a steady voice, his words echoing slightly in the paneled room. Marcus was named the recipient of the Carter family's most valuable cattle land acres of good grazing that ensured his dominance in the county's ranching trade. Clara was left the family house in the center of Oak Hollow and a sizable bank account enough to guarantee her continued place in society. And then Jenkins paused, glancing at Eli. "To my youngest son, Eli Carter, I leave Carter Ranch, the original homestead, and the horse Dusty, in hopes that he may find in them a new beginning." The words hung in the room like smoke. Marcus barked out a laugh. "A new beginning? That ranch is nothing but weeds and broken boards. And the horse Dusty, that animal's half dead already." "Suits you perfectly, Eli." Clara let out a quiet, disdainful chuckle. "Father always knew how to punish you, even from the grave." Their voices overlapped, mocking filling the room. Eli sat still, his hands resting on his hat. For a moment his jaw tightened, but he offered no retort. He simply lowered his eyes, letting their laughter wash over him like a storm he had weathered too many times before. Harold Jenkins cleared his throat again, uneasy with the tension. "That concludes the will." The office of Harold Jenkins had emptied quickly after the will was read. Marcus and Clara left in a cloud of perfume and arrogance, their laughter still echoing off the wooden walls. Eli lingered, his hand pressed against the brim of his hat, as if to shield himself from the weight of what he had just inherited. The silence in the office pressed close until Jenkins cleared his throat softly. "There's one more matter," the lawyer said, his voice steady but not unkind. "Your father arranged for Dusty to be kept in town until you were ready to take him. A family friend boarded him at the livery stable. I'm instructed to release him to you today." Eli followed Jenkins through the back door, out into the stable yard where the air smelled of hay and sun-baked wood. And there, tethered to a post, stood the horse his father had left him. Dusty was older than Eli had imagined his coat, a faded mix of gray and brown ribs, pressing sharp against sagging skin. His mane hung uneven, tangled where time and neglect had left their mark. The saddle on his back looked as though it had seen half a century of hard rides, its leather patched with strips of worn rawhide. When Dusty shifted his weight, the girth creaked like old floorboards. Eli stopped staring at the animal for a long moment. His chest tightened with something between pity and anger. "So that's it," he murmured under his breath. "Father leaves me a horse one step from the grave." Behind him, Marcus's voice carried from where he leaned against the stable rail, smirking like a wolf. "Careful, little brother. Might not even make it out of town before he keels over on you." Clara's laughter followed sharp and amused, but Eli didn't rise to the bait. He stepped forward, took the worn reins from Jenkins's hand, and wrapped them around his calloused palm. For a moment, he stood there silent, his jaw tight, before nodding once. Without another word, he led Dusty away. The road out of Oak Hollow stretched in a ribbon of red dust beneath the sinking sun. It was long and lonely, winding through open prairie toward the distant hills where Carter Ranch lay waiting like a forgotten memory. Eli swung himself into the saddle, the leather groaning under his weight, and let Dusty pick up a steady pace. To his surprise, the horse moved with a measured rhythm each step, firm and deliberate despite the jut of his bones. He didn't stumble or lag as Eli had expected. Instead, his gait was steady, sure, almost patient. The prairie rolled out wide on both sides, endless fields of tall grass bent by the dry wind. In the distance, the mountains stood dark and solemn, their peaks brushed gold by the last light of day. The sun was dipping low, bleeding orange across the horizon, and the sky above burned with streaks of red. Dust swirled around them, with each hoofbeat rising and falling like smoke. Eli kept his eyes on the road, but more than once he felt the horse's gaze turn toward him. When he glanced down, Dusty was watching him with eyes that were dark calm and startlingly deep. It was not the vacant stare of a worn-out beast, but something older, wiser, as if the animal had been carrying a secret too long. "Don't look at me like that," Eli muttered. "I don't need you, old boy. You and we're just two leftovers they didn't know what to do with." Dusty answered with a soft whicker, his ears flicking back then forward again, as though he were trying to soothe his rider's bitterness. The sound carried strangely, in the quiet more comforting than Eli cared to admit. The road narrowed as it cut through a stand of cottonwoods. Their leaves whispered in the breeze, casting trembling shadows across the ground. The rhythm of hooves echoed against the trunks, a steady drumming that filled the silence Eli carried with him. He thought of the words his father had left in the will. Words Jenkins had read in that measured tone. "I leave Eli Carter, the ranch, and Dusty, with the hope that he may find in them a new beginning." A new beginning. Eli almost laughed. What beginning could there be in a ranch falling to ruin in a horse whose best years had died 2 decades ago? His father had never given him kindness in life. Why would he begin now in death? The silence pressed heavier. The only sound was the cadence of Dusty's hooves striking the hard ground. Eli let the rhythm carry him steady and unchanging, even as his mind refused to settle. But silence had its cracks. Old memories crept through the gaps, dragging faces long gone back into the fading light. Luke Dawson. Eli could see him as clear as the day they had first met, a lean young cowboy, with sun-bleached hair and a grin too wide for the troubles he carried. Luke had been everything Eli was not: bold where Eli was quiet, hopeful where Eli was tired. His eyes had always been alive with some dream, some conviction that the world still held treasures worth chasing. And for Luke, the greatest treasure of all had been Carter Ranch. Years ago, Luke had sat with Eli beneath the rafters of the old barn, the two of them passing a dented flask back and forth while the prairie night sang outside. I'm telling you, Luke had set his voice alight with certainty. There's something buried on that land. Gold, maybe, or a stash from the old bank robberies. Folks whisper about it, but I believe it. That ranch is hiding something. Eli had laughed, then the sounds sharp and disbelieving. Ghost stories and tall tales. That's all you've got. But Luke hadn't flinched. No, I've seen things. Marks in the wood. Old maps. Your father knows something. You just don't want to see it. Eli had shaken his head, rolling his eyes at what he thought was foolishness. You're chasing shadows, Luke. Nothing more. But Luke had kept chasing. He chased until the night he didn't come back. They found him days later at the edge of the Carter property, his body broken from a fall into a ravine, his pockets empty, but his eyes still open, as though searching for the treasure he had sworn was real. The memory struck Eli harder than he wanted to admit. Luke's laugh, his belief, his sudden silence. It left a chill in Eli's chest that the evening sun couldn't warm. He shifted in the saddle, glancing down at Dusty again. The old horse plodded on his ears, twitching his gaze forward. Yet for a fleeting moment, Eli wondered if his father had chosen Dusty for a reason. Maybe the horse wasn't just a burden. Maybe he was the last thread to something deep. The sun was dropping low when Eli finally reached the old Carter Ranch. The trail narrowed into a rutted lane, bordered by thickets of foxtail and stubborn patches of thistle that scratched against his boots as Dusty trudged onward. When the gate came into view, Eli pulled the reins, his chest tightening at the sight. The once proud wooden arch that bore his family's name leaned drunkenly to one side, its hinges shrieking like wounded things in the evening wind. The sign that read Carter Ranch was little more than faded paint, and the letters chipped until only ghosts of words remained. Fence posts along the lane sagged broken in places where weather and time had taken their toll. Beyond them, weeds grew wild, curling up over the path as if to reclaim it from man's neglect. The old windmill towered over the fields like a sentinel that had lost its purpose. Its blades rusted and spinning loosely in the hot breeze, groaning with every turn. Dusty halted just short of the gate, ears pricked, as though listening to something Eli couldn't hear. Eli drew a deep breath, tugged the reins, and said quietly, "Home, or what's left of it." The dust swirled golden in the dying light, carrying with it the mingled scents of dry earth, sunburned wood, and the sour tang of decay. Eli pushed the gate open, its cry echoing down the empty road, and led Dusty inside. The barn stood first in his path, its roof sagging under the weight of years. A corner of corrugated tin hung loose, clattering against the rafters whenever the wind stirred. Beams, once solid, now sagged with splits like broken bones. The feeding troughs were bent and rusted, one split wide open along its seam. The stall doors, swollen with damp, refused to close properly, their edges jagged with rot. The yard behind the barn was no better. The ground was rough-pitted with holes where foxes or prairie dogs had dug. Ropes still dangled from the hitching posts, frayed to threads that looked ready to snap if pulled. Eli squatted, running a hand across the dirt, and shook his head. The tack room greeted him with the musk of mildew and old leather. Saddles and bridles hung in tatters green with mold, their metal fittings scattered like broken teeth on the floorboards. In the far corner beneath cobwebs and dust sat the saddle his father had once used, a heavy, hand-tooled seat scarred with long cracks. Eli brushed the surface with his fingertips, stirring motes of dust into the air. It was like touching a relic from a time that had forgotten him. Beside the barn, the hand pump stood stiff with rust. Eli wrapped his palm around the handle, gave it a shove, and heard the hollow groan of pipes long unused. He pushed again and again until finally water coughed from the spout, first brown and cloudy, then clear. He filled a bucket, carried it back, and set it before Dusty. The old horse lowered his muzzle without hesitation, drinking deeply before lifting his head to look at Eli, ears forward, patient as ever. Eli muttered, "One night here, old boy. Tomorrow we'll see what's worth fixing." But even as he said it, his gaze drifted to the warped planks along the back wall of the barn. One section bulged oddly, as though something lay beneath. He frowned, then turned away. Not tonight. The house greeted him with silence and dust. The front door resisted, swollen in its frame, until Eli leaned his shoulder and shoved. It opened with a groan, releasing a burst of stale air and a storm of dust that danced in the sunset light. The living room lay beneath shrouds of white cloth, ghostly outlines of furniture gathered in stillness. The fireplace was long dead, its hearth cold beside it, a rocking chair that had once been his mother's. On the mantel, family photographs lay face down as though ashamed to show themselves. He passed into the kitchen where warped cabinets leaned like tired men. Spice jars sat capped with mold glass, cloudy with age. The sink was stained, its faucet dripping a slow, irregular rhythm. He pulled open a drawer and found it cluttered with nail screws and a lighter that clicked uselessly when he tried it. The small bedroom was worse, a narrow iron bed groaning beneath a mattress sunken in the middle. A wool blanket unraveling at its edges. The window let in only a weak shaft of fading sunlight, filtered through dirt caked thick upon the glass. Eli dragged a cloth from the dining table, shook it off, and let the dust fall like a curtain. Beneath it sat the table his father had once eaten, at its surface scratched and scarred. In the corner cabinet, his hand found a bottle, a squat thing of brown glass, with its label torn nearly away. He turned it over slowly, the liquid inside catching the dim light. His jaw clenched. He set it back and slammed the door shut harder than he meant to. Not yet. Back outside, he set about the chores of survival. At the pump, he worked the handle again, filling the bucket and carrying it to the stall. Dusty drank while Eli scoured the tack room for something, anything that might serve as feed. In a corner, he found a bale of hay, dry and brittle, but still good enough to chew. He pulled a bundle free, carried it to the stall, and spread it in the manger. He tied Dusty in the stall where the roof sagged, least running a hand down the horse's foreleg to check the hooves. Cracks marred them, but no blood. Just neglect. Dusty lowered his head and began to eat, chewing slowly, lifting his head now and again, as though to confirm Eli hadn't left him. Eli lit a kerosene lantern and hung it on a post. Its flame flickered weakly in the encroaching dark, casting their shadows long against the stall walls. For the first time that day, the place looked less like a tomb and more like a shelter, if only barely. Night fell hard and fast. Inside the house, Eli sat at the kitchen table, the silence pressing down on him. The bottle in the cupboard whispered with the familiarity of old sins. By twilight, he could no longer ignore it. He pulled it out, dusted the glass with his sleeve, and uncorked it. "One drink," he muttered. "Just one to sleep." He poured into a chipped glass, the liquor splashing with a sound that was almost too inviting. He carried both bottle and glass onto the front porch. the boards creaking beneath his boots. From there, he could see the barn lantern glowing faintly against the dark. He set the glass on the railing, lifted it, and exhaled. The burn of whiskey on his tongue would make the silence bearable. But the moment before he drank, Dusty stirred. The horse stepped out from his stall, ears pricked, eyes fixed on the porch. Then, in a slow and deliberate motion, he walked to the fence, leaned over, and thrust his head toward Eli. The nudge came sudden and sharp, knocking Eli's wrist. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the porch boards, whiskey spreading dark across the wood. "Damn it!" Eli swore, jerking back. "What the hell?" But the words died as he looked into Dusty's eyes. There was no panic there, no randomness. Only a steady, intent gaze, calm as a priest's rebuke. Dusty snorted once, lowered his muzzle to the bottle still in Eli's hand, and pushed. The bottle rolled toward the porch edge, clinking against the wood. Eli froze. The horse struck his hoof against the ground, one sharp, deliberate sound. For a long moment, neither moved. The lantern light wavered. The prairie wind carried the scent of dry grass across the porch. Eli swallowed, then slowly capped the bottle and set it down far from reach. He barked a dry laugh. "All right, old man. Not tonight." The anger in him drained into something else, something he hadn't felt in years. Embarrassment, relief, even a flicker of gratitude. He crouched, reached out, and rubbed the horse's muzzle, scratching the coarse hair along his jaw. "Not bad," he said quietly. "I thought only people had sense enough to stop me." Dusty blew through his nostrils' ears, tilting halfway back, content. And in that broken porch, under the vast darkening sky, Eli realized they had just begun something fragile and real. A thread thin as spider silk had been tied between them, an understanding that neither man nor beast could name but both recognized. The first streaks of dawn washed the prairie in pale gold when Eli rose from the cot in the corner of the house. The air was cool, carrying the scent of dry grass and old timber. He stretched stiff shoulders, splashed water on his face, and stepped outside. Dust lay pink in the sunrise, and the distant hills glowed soft and green. He headed toward the barn, expecting a quiet morning. His plan was simple: pump fresh water, drop some hay for Dusty, then maybe patch a hinge or two. But as he neared the weathered doors, a sound cut through the stillness. Thud, thud, thud. It was steady, deliberate. He pushed the doors open and saw Dusty standing in his stall, one hoof striking the floorboards, again and again. The noise echoed sharp against the timbers, rattling dust into the shafts of sunlight streaming through gaps in the roof. The air shimmered with it, a haze of gold and grit that made the moment feel half unreal. "Hey," Eli called. "Cut it out, old man. You'll bring this whole place down." But Dusty didn't stop. He struck again, pawing at the same patch of ground, as though the spot itself had insulted him. His ears flicked once, but his gaze stayed fixed, intent. Eli scowled, stepping closer. "You trying to stomp a hole clean through, or just looking to drive me mad?" The horse snorted, kept at it. Frustration rose quick and hot. Eli slapped the nearest post with his palm, the crack echoing. "Enough, Dusty, I said stop for a heartbeat." Dusty froze, ears, sharp eyes wide. Then slowly, almost ceremonially, he lifted his hoof and pawed again. One strike. Pause. Another. The rhythm different now, deliberate, like knocking. Eli's irritation faltered. The horse was looking straight at him, eyes dark and steady, not restless like an animal spooked. More like waiting. A cold prickle ran up Eli's spine. He remembered the way Dusty had stopped him with the whiskey last night and how those eyes had seemed to speak. He swallowed hard, gaze dropping to the floorboards beneath the hoof. "Same place you balked at yesterday," he muttered. Dusty pawed once more, slow and insistent. Crouching, Eli brushed aside the dirt and chaff. The boards here looked different, darker, damp-stained long ago. He ran his hand over them and felt the grain softer, less solid than the rest. Pulling the small knife from his belt, he scraped along the edges, lifting caked dust away. What he uncovered made him pause. The wood bore long, narrow cuts, not random rot, but marks too straight, too purposeful. Like someone had taken a blade to carve a line. He tapped the knife handle against it. The sound came hollow, unlike the solid thump from the other planks. His pulse quickened. "Hell," he whispered. "There's something under here." He looked up and Dusty was watching him, still ears tipped forward as if to say finally. Reason tried to fight its way back into his mind. Maybe it was nothing, just damp wood, just tricks of sound. The ranch was falling apart. No surprise some boards rang different. He should patch it, move on. But another voice whispered louder, Luke Dawson. He saw his friend's face, as it had been years ago, full of conviction, telling stories about treasure buried under Carter Ranch, about tunnels maps, gold caches from old outlaw days. Eli had laughed, told him to quit chasing ghost tales. Luke had kept searching until the day he died, in what they called an accident. What if he'd been right? What if Eli's father had known something left more than just a broken ranch and a half-dead horse? Eli pressed his back to the post, staring at the floor. Sunlight cut through a crack in the roof, catching the motes in a golden whirl. His head spun. He dragged a hand down his face, then exhaled long and hard. "All right," he said under his breath. "Let's see what you're trying to show me." He pried up the nearest plank splinters, groaning, and lifted it free. Dust and rot crumbled away, but beneath wasn't packed earth like the rest of the barn. It was flatter, harder, a strange patch of compacted soil that looked laid, not natural. He dug with his knife fingers, scraping dirt loose. Almost immediately, he struck something foreign, a corner of cloth. He pulled gently, and a fragment of oiled canvas slid into view, stiff but intact after years underground. His breath caught. Beneath that, another texture wood, smoother and straighter than roots or stone. He brushed more away, revealing the edge of a board darker than the surrounding soil, running crosswise like a lid. Eli sat back on his heels, sweat slicking his brow. "God Almighty," he whispered. "What did you hide down here?" Dad Dusty shifted, blowing a loud breath, and then stamped once more, firm urging. "Yeah," Eli said, voice trembling. "I get it. Keep going." He reached to pull another plank loose when a noise outside froze him. A low rumble, mechanical, cutting through the still morning. The cough of an old truck engine turning over, then choking off. Eli stiffened. He shoved the loose board back in place, dragged a rake of straw and dirt over the gap, scattering it until the area looked as it had before. His heart thudded. He stepped out into the yard, scanning the road. The dust was still the horizon, empty. Only faint tire tracks cut across the hard-packed lane, already fading in the light breeze. Whoever it was had come close enough to hear him working, then gone, or chosen to wait unseen. His neck prickled. He lingered a moment longer, listening, but the prairie was silent again. When he returned, Dusty was still by the stall door, head-high, ears twitching toward the road. "You felt it too," Eli muttered. He sank onto a bale of hay hands, dirty with soil and splinters. Dusty stepped close, watching him with that same unreadable calm. Eli shook his head and let out a ragged laugh. "How long have you known, huh? How long have you been standing guard over this damn secret?" The horse only exhaled slow and heavy and tilted his head. Eli rubbed his face with grimy hands, exhaustion and wonder mixing. until he didn't know what he felt. Alone, he would have called himself crazy for even starting. But with Dusty staring at him like that, it didn't feel like madness. It felt like partnership. He pushed himself up, patted the stall rail, and said, "Not today. Not yet. We'll need tools, light a plan. If somebody's sniffing around out there, I can't just tear into this blind." Dusty shifted, settled back on his hooves, as if satisfied for now. Eli picked up the rake again and carefully layered straw until the hidden planks looked no different from the rest. He stood a long while after staring at the spot, his chest tight with a feeling he hadn't expected, not dread, not quite excitement, but the spark of something alive. The Carter Ranch was no longer just a burden to drag. It held a mystery and maybe even a purpose. Eli hadn't slept much. The weight of what he'd glimpsed beneath the barn floorboards gnawed at him through the long night. He tossed, stared at the ceiling. Rose sat back down. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the outline of wood, the glint of hidden metal, and Dusty's steady gaze urging him on. By dawn, he'd made up his mind. He strapped on his belt, took the small knife, a rust-bitten crowbar, and the old kerosene lantern. When he stepped outside, the prairie was still wrapped in a gray, chilled dew clinging to the weeds, the sky streaked with pale light. Dusty was waiting. The old horse stood by the stall rail, head lifted, ears forward, as if he'd known exactly what Eli intended. There was no pawing now, no restless sound, only a calm expectation. Eli stopped, drew a slow breath. "All right, old man. You wanted me to see. Let's finish it." He pushed open the barn doors. The smell of hay, rot, and dust wrapped around him. He dragged aside the straw he'd spread the day before, fitted the crowbar between the warped planks, and pried upward. The wood groaned, split. A damp, earthy odor rose stronger this time, laced with something metallic and old. It didn't take long before a dull gleam broke through the soil. At first, Eli thought it a stone. But when the crowbar scraped across it, the sound rang with unmistakable weight, metal on metal. His heart hammered. He dug faster, hands blistering, sweat beading despite the morning chill. The earth yielded grudgingly, clods scattering as he worked. Inch by inch, the shape came free. Not stone, not pipe, but a corner of something square. He widened the whole breadth, ragged until he could see it clearly, an iron chest half buried, large enough to fill half a stall. He hooked the crowbar beneath and heaved. The soil resisted, but Eli braced and pulled with every ounce of strength. With a final lurch, it slid free, clanging against the boards. He fell back, chest heaving. The chest was scarred and brown with rust, the edges eaten but still solid. On the lid, faint beneath grime, was an emblem, what looked like a 5-pointed star, half erased, alongside numbers, long since worn to ghosts. Eli wiped the surface with his sleeve until his arm was streaked with dirt. "God above," he muttered, voice shaking. "This is what you buried, Dad. This is what you left behind." Dusty stepped closer, breath-heavy, ears tilting. He struck the ground once, a sharp beat, as though urging Eli not to falter. The lock and hinges were fused with age. Eli jammed the crowbar into the seam. The metal shrieked as it gave flakes of rust, flying, the sound echoing through the empty barn. His muscles screamed, but the lid shifted, lifted, and at last swung back. The smell hit first pungent, sharp, a blend of damp paper, old iron, and the sour tang of gunpowder, long stale. It clung to the throat, acrid as smoke. For a long moment, Eli hesitated. His knuckles whitened around the crowbar. "What if it's cursed?" he whispered. "What if this is what killed Luke?" But curiosity had sunk its claws deep, and the answer waited just inches away. He leaned forward and looked inside. A revolver lay at the top, its barrel brown with rust, but carved with intricate filigree, the ivory grip cracked and stained. Eli picked it up carefully. The handle bore dark flecks that time hadn't erased, blood old and dry. Beneath the gun lay stacks of bills bundled in fraying twine. The edges were brittle corners eaten by silverfish, but the faces were still visible. Notes from another era, 20s and 50s, marked with seals from decades past. Beside them, 2 bars of gold glowed faintly, even under dust heavy and undeniable. Eli brushed one with trembling fingers. The luster shone through grime, stubborn and pure. The bottom was layered with paper bank receipts, letters tied in a cracked leather thong, maps with ink bled into blotches. One folded sheet caught his eye, a newspaper clipping yellowed nearly to brown. The headline screamed across it, "Oak Hollow Bank Robbed. 3 dead. Culprits escape with fortune." Eli's mouth went dry. His hands shook as he turned a map over. On the back, written in a rough, familiar scrawl, "This debt will be kept by Carter until it can be repaid." Eli's stomach dropped. Jesus. Dad. You held on to this. You made us live in ruin while this sat rotting under our feet. Dusty shifted, blowing a sharp breath, and stamped again, as if in emphasis. Eli rifled through the chest in disbelief. The money, though aged, still bore weight. The gold alone small bars, but each heavy as a brick, was worth a fortune. He stacked them in his hands, tested the heft, his arms trembling. He counted quickly, rough, realizing the trove could easily amount to millions if restored and sold. He staggered back, sank onto the dirt, his heart pounding loud enough to drown out thought. Never in his life had he held so much value. One stroke of luck, one buried chest, and he had gone from broke, near destitute, to holding a treasure men had killed for. Dusty. His voice was hoarse-awed. You brought me to it. You showed me. Did my father teach you somehow? Did you know all along? Dusty's ears flicked. He tilted his head, gave a low, almost approving nicker. Eli laughed once broken and covered his face, but awe curdled quickly to dread. The revolver, the blood, the headline, they weren't symbols of blessing, but of death. Men had died for this. His father had hidden it. Luke had died chasing it. If he turned it in suspicion, would land on him as accomplice or descendant of thieves. If he kept it, he'd live under the shadow of discovery. Marcus would claw for a share, Clara would denounce him. The town would swarm like vultures. This isn't just money, he whispered. It's a curse. He pressed his hands to his temples. Dad, you left me a noose or a crown. Which did you mean it to be? The barn seemed to hold its breath. Dust motes swirled in shafts of light. Eli looked at Dusty. The horse's gaze was calm, steady, not promising easy answers, but offering something more: companionship, a reminder he wasn't alone in the burden. Maybe it wasn't just a treasure. Maybe it was a key, not to wealth for its own sake, but to rebuilding the ranch, paying debts, reclaiming a name. Eli closed the lid, hands trembling. One by one, he replaced the contents, tucked the revolver back into its bed, folded the papers tight. He lowered the lid, hammered the rusted clasp back into place, and dragged loose straw across it until the floor looked whole again. He straightened, lantern flickering at his side, sweat cooling on his skin. No one can know, he said softly. Not yet. Not until I understand what this means. He reached out, stroked Dusty's graying mane. The horse leaned into the touch, warm and solid. From here on, Eli murmured, voice steadying, it's just you and me. I trust you more than I'll ever trust them. Dusty let out a long, slow breath, eyes half-lidded in quiet agreement. For the first time in years, Eli felt not the crushing weight of ruin, but the tremor of possibility. Dangerous, uncertain, but alive. The secret was theirs now, and with it, a new path had opened whether he wanted it or not. Eli had thought he could bury the chest again and carry on as if nothing had changed. But secrets, especially the kind buried in old barns, had a way of seeping through cracks and finding the wind. Within a week, whispers began curling through Oak Hollow like smoke through dry grass. At first, they were nothing more than observations. The water pump repairman told anyone who'd listen that Eli Carter, usually stingy with every cent, had come in for nails hinges and paint. Like he suddenly cared about that dying ranch of his. A second source came from the used goods trader who swore Eli had asked about new padlocks, lanterns, and chains. Chains, the man muttered over beer, not the kind you buy unless you're keeping something shut tight. At Ruby's bar, a trio of regular drunks leaned on their elbows and remarked that the youngest Carter looked suspiciously cheerful these days. Grinning like he found a gold tooth in the dirt, one chuckled. The comment stuck. Before long, the talk was no longer about a smile, but about fortune itself. And because Oak Hollow was a town that remembered everything, old stories crawled back into daylight. Folks recalled how Carter Ranch had been tied however loosely to the infamous bank robbery of decades past. They remembered Luke Dawson, the man who died mysteriously on Carter land, and the rumors that he'd been chasing a lost stash. It didn't take long before the whispers hardened into certainty. Carter Ranch held a secret, and Eli Carter had found it. The rumors spread like wildfire on prairie wind. Ruby's bar, once just the smoky refuge of ranch hands and drifters, turned into the unofficial stock exchange of gossip. Old Jake, hunched in the corner, swore he'd heard digging at Carter Ranch in the dead of night. Steel on stone, I tell you. He's unearthing something. Ruby, herself polishing glasses behind the counter, frowned at the talk. "Don't spread poison," she snapped. "The boy's finally trying to fix that place. Let him." But her caution was drowned beneath laughter and speculation. Men leaned closer over their drinks, spinning tales that grew richer with each retelling. Meanwhile, at May's general store, the whispers had a different flavor, quieter but no less sharp. Housewives clustered near the flour sacks and traded suspicions. If there's gold, his brother and sister will be sniffing it out before long. Another added, "Word is Harlan Briggs's people have been circling the property." May, trying to count change, rolled her eyes, but didn't interrupt. She knew better. Once Oak Hollow women began weaving rumor into fact, nothing could unravel it. The first sign that the whispers had legs appeared on Carter's soil itself. Early one morning, Eli noticed fresh tire tracks etched into the dirt road leading to his gate. The prints were crisp, the edges not yet worn by wind, made only hours before. Later that day, he found the western fence cut and hastily spliced back together. The work was sloppy, the wire twisted in a way no rancher would leave it. And in the barn, just feet from the spot Dusty had pawed out the secret, Eli saw prints in the dust boot tracks, larger than his own, pausing near the stall, like a man had stood still listening. The realization knifed through him. Someone had been inside. Someone had stood within arm's reach of the buried chest. Dusty was uneasy too. The old horse shifted restlessly, ears flicking toward the northern rise, as if something lingered out of sight. Eli felt the hair on his arms lift. He wasted no time reinforcing the place. New crossbars over the barn doors, bolts on the gates, locks on the cellar. Each swing of the hammer made his heart pound harder. He told himself it was precaution, but he knew the truth. Once the world suspects treasure locks are invitations. The real test arrived under a burning noon sun. A polished pickup rolled up to the Carter gate, gleaming so bright it looked out of place among the dust. Out stepped Harlan Briggs. He was a man who wore money like a second skin. Polished boots, crisp, white Stetson, a shirt with pearl buttons that had never seen work. His smile was wide teeth, even the kind that cost money to maintain. Afternoon, he called, strolling toward the gate, as if it already belonged to him. Name's Briggs. Harlan Briggs. Folks say you and I might have business. Eli stood with one hand on the wooden gate, the other near his belt. Dusty moved behind him, nostrils flaring a shadow of muscle and mistrust. Briggs's eyes slid past Eli over the barn, the water tower, the patched roof of the Carter house. His gaze lingered where the new padlock gleamed in the sun. He smiled again, thinner this time, like a man counting before buying. "I've been working friendly with your brother Marcus," he said smoothly, "and your sister Clara. Both smart folks. Thought I'd come extend a hand." The pitch began as honey. "You've got a fine place here, son. Bit worn, but bones are good. Just needs investment. I've got clients, serious clients, who treat it right. What say we make a deal?" He laid a folder against the gate. Inside neat type promised a generous sum for Carter Ranch. Plenty more where this came from, Briggs continued. "We're talking improvements, sun-paved roads, electricity water lines. Maybe even a heritage ranch attraction. Folks will come from counties over. And you," he tapped the folder, "you'll walk away with a pocket full of cash." He softened his voice. "I know it's been hard. This is a clean slate. Take the money, head down to Arizona, start fresh." All the while, his eyes flicked over Eli's face, hunting for cracks, greed, hope, fear. But Eli's expression was stone. Dusty blew through his nostrils, a sharp warning. Briggs chuckled. "Fine horse you've got there." When silence answered, he pushed harder. "Tell you what, let's sweeten it. Add 15% on top if you sign today." He drew a slip from his coat, a check already filled with figures enough to make most men dizzy. He pressed it through the slats. Then came the clincher. Briggs leaned in, lowering his voice like he was sharing sacred knowledge. "Between you and me, this land's going under county review. Rezoning. Anyone who doesn't sell now, they'll be squeezed later. Better to take good money while it's on the table." Eli finally spoke, his tone measured. "Who's buying which company? What rights do I keep to the house?" Briggs waved it off. "Don't worry about the paperwork. Just worry about the payout." Overhead, a flock of crows burst from the cottonwood's black wings, scattering against the white sky. Dust rose the lantern on the porch, rattled in the breeze. Eli's eyes drifted downward to Briggs's boots. Dust clung to the soles not from the road, but from the western fence line, the same cut wire he'd found. He filed it away in silence. At last, Eli looked down at the check. Then, without haste, he pushed it back. "This ranch is blood and bone," he said quietly. "It isn't for sale." Dusty stepped forward, shoulder to shoulder with him, hooves thudding the dirt. Briggs's smile froze, then hardened around the edges. "You'll change your mind. Money talks louder than sentiment. Not to me." The night had an unnatural stillness to it, as if the land itself was holding its breath. For days now, Eli Carter had felt eyes on his back, shadows that didn't belong, a quiet pressure rising around Carter Ranch. He hadn't slept well in a week. Tonight, he gave up the pretense of rest altogether. The lantern on the porch burned steady, casting its weak glow across the dusty yard. Eli sat in an old rocking chair, a coil of rope tucked neatly at his hip, a shovel propped beside him, within easy reach. His body leaned back, but his eyes stayed sharp, fixed on the dark fields. Out in the barn, Dusty shifted in his stall, ears pricked, nostrils flaring every few minutes toward the northern rise. The old gelding sensed something before Eli did, and that was saying a lot. The bugs had gone silent, even the wind had settled. The world felt suspended, and Eli's gut told him why. Something was coming. "Storm's about to break," he muttered under his breath. From the brush line west of the ranch, 3 figures emerged. They moved low, wrapped in dark clothes, faces half hidden by bandanas. One carried a crowbar, another a hunting knife, and the third gripped a flashlight wrapped in cloth to dim the beam. The leader's whisper carried sharp in the night. "Boss says the chest is in the horse barn. We're in, we're out. Keep it quick." They slipped to the fence, where weeks ago someone had already cut wire. The new patch wasn't hard to undo. A few snips and twists and they crawled through. "Pathetic," one of them muttered with a grin. "Old Cowboy like him's probably drunk asleep. Won't know till morning." They crept across the dirt yard, boots crunching softly until the barn loomed ahead. The leader tested the latch, then jammed the crowbar between the planks. Wood groaned faintly as metal bit into it. The sound shivered through the night. Dusty reacted first. The horse slammed a hoof against the stall floor, the thunder of it shaking the barn. One intruder flinched. "Damn nag." Before he could finish, Dusty drew in a lungful of air and let out a piercing whinny that tore through the silence. The call rolled across the yard, across the hills beyond, a wild, furious alarm. Eli's head snapped up. His heart hammered and he was already moving, snatching the lantern and killing the flame with a swift twist. Darkness swallowed the porch. "They're here." He breathed adrenaline washing over him. Dusty didn't let up. He smashed his body against the stall wall, rattling the boards until they groaned. The barn trembled under his fury. The thieves cursed, struggling to hold the crowbar steady. Eli knew every inch of his land, every shadow, every creak. He darted across the yard under cover of dark, crouching low until he reached the barn side. From there, he slid behind an old crate, the shovel balanced in one hand. Through a gap in the wood, he saw them 3 shapes hunched against the door, sweat glistening as they worked in haste. No gun, Eli thought grimly. Just a shovel, a rope, and an old horse. He tapped the crate softly with his knuckle. Once, twice. Dusty froze, ears flicking, then rammed the stall with such force a plank popped loose. The thieves jumped back, startled by the sudden crack of wood. That was Eli's chance. He lunged from the shadows. The man with a crowbar turned too late. The flat of Eli's shovel came down hard across his arm. Bone met steel with a sickening thud. The crowbar clattered to the ground as the man screamed. The other 2 spun, knives flashing. Eli rolled sideways, a blade slicing clean through the fabric of his shirt, but missing skin. He came up low, swinging the shovel into the dirt. Dust exploded upward, blinding in the moonlight. The intruder's coughed eyes stinging. Behind them, Dusty's stall door shattered outward. The horse burst free, gray hide, glinting eyes burning with fury. Dusty reared hooves, lashing forward. One intruder caught the full weight of a chest strike, the force hurling him backward into a haystack. He crumpled in a heap, breath knocked clean out of him. The third lunged at Eli with his knife, but Dusty pivoted, hindquarters coiling. With a savage kick, his back hooves struck the man square in the wrist. The knife flew spinning into the dirt. Eli seized the moment. He whipped the rope from his hip, cast it, and the loop snapped tight around the man's arm. A sharp jerk, a twist, and the man was face first in the dirt, tangled in cowboy knots that gave no mercy. Dusty trumpeted another whinny, a sound of dominance that shook the rafters. Dust swirled vision, muddled hearts pounding. But the first man, the one whose arm hung limp from the shovel strike, wasn't finished. Groaning, he clawed for a broken beam, hefted it, and swung wildly at Eli. Eli caught the blow on the shovel's handle. Sparks snapped as wood and steel collided. The shock drove him back a step, knees buckling. The man advanced again, eyes burning. Dusty barreled between them, muscles rippling despite his age. The horse thrust his weight forward, driving the man off balance. Eli pivoted with the shovel shaft, swept it sideways, catching the thug across the temple. The man crumpled, finally still. Now only groans and curses filled the barn. One thief writhed in the lasso, another lay half buried in hay, the last moaned from the dirt. "You bastard," one spat through blood. "You won't hold us long. You don't know who you're crossing." Eli tightened the rope, face set like stone. "I don't need to know. You came here. That's enough." By the time silence returned, Eli's shirt clung with sweat. His chest heaved, shovel slick in his grip. He forced the three men together, binding wrists and ankles with quick, merciless knots. Years of ranch work had taught him how to tie something that only a blade could undo. Dusty stood beside him, sides heaving, eyes never leaving the dark beyond the barn door. Even after the last man was tied, the horse remained alert, ears flicking, ready for another fight. Eli brushed his hand against the gelding's neck. "Good work, old man. Couldn't have done it without you." Far in the distance, the faint barking of dogs carried from town, proof the noise had traveled. Oak Hollow would soon know something had happened at Carter Ranch. Eli stared at the men he'd captured. His gut told him the truth. He didn't want to admit Marcus or Clara or both were behind this. Briggs had planted the idea, fanned the flames. These weren't drifters. They were tools. The logical move was to call the sheriff. File the report, let the law drag them away. But Eli hesitated. Hand them over, and the whole town will know, he thought grimly. Rumors will explode. Everyone will swarm this place like flies on honey. No, not tonight. Instead, he hauled them one by one into the storage shed, lashed them to the posts, and barred the door. They would stay there till sunrise, until he decided what to do. As he finished securing the last knot, Dusty's head snapped toward the ridge north of the ranch. His body's stiffened ears locked on a shape at the horizon. Eli followed his gaze. For the briefest instant, he saw it too, a lone silhouette on the hill, still as stone, watching. Then it slipped back into darkness. A chill ran through him. The fight hadn't been the end. It was only the beginning. He clenched his fist, whispered low so only Dusty could hear. "They're not stopping. This is war now." The Oak Hollow night returned to silence. But it was the silence after gunfire, the kind that told Eli Carter his secret wasn't hidden anymore. The $5 million in the earth had just turned his quiet ranch into a battlefield. And he knew the storm had only begun. The dawn came, reluctantly dragging a pale veil of mist across Carter Ranch. The fields glistened with dew, each blade of grass silvered under the first light. Eli hadn't slept at all. His body was heavy, his mind taut, the night's violence still echoing in his bones. 3 men lay bound in the storage shed, their muffled curses rising now and then, like the groan of ghosts. He walked the yard with Dusty close beside him, the old gelding, restless ears pinned forward, snorting, as if every corner might hide another threat. Eli's boots traced the ground near the barn. He crouched, fingertips brushing the dirt. Tracks, more than 3 sets. There, the outline of a heavier tread different from the others. A 4th man. And further on, faint ridges in the dirt, where tires had pressed and pulled away, vanishing into the road beyond. He checked the barn door again. The latch had been bent but not fully broken. Near the stall wall, grooves cut into the earth where rope had dragged. They'd come for something specific. Not horses, not tools. They had come for the chest. The secret Thomas Carter had buried deep. Eli rose slowly, Dusty, nosing his shoulder as if to steady him. "This isn't petty theft," Eli murmured. "Someone who knows the truth sent them." The low rumble of a truck rolled down the dirt road. Dust swirled as an old county pickup came to a stop at the ranch gate. Sheriff Morgan stepped down with a creak of boots, a tall man in a weathered coat and wide-brimmed hat, gray in his beard, but his eyes sharp and alive. For 30 years he had kept order in Oak Hollow not through fear, but through fairness. The town respected him because he was steady like an oak that had seen too many storms and still stood. "Mornin', Eli," Morgan said, tipping his hat. "Some folks in town said they heard shouting out here last night. I figured I'd come around." His gaze swept the yard, lingering on the scraped door latch, the new lock on the barn, and the fresh scuff marks on the porch. He missed nothing. Eli's throat tightened. For a heartbeat, he considered lying, brushing it all off as nothing more than drunk drifters passing through. But something in Morgan's steady look wouldn't let him. "I caught 3 of them," Eli said finally, voice low. "They're tied up in the shed." Morgan adjusted the brim of his hat. "Show me. And this time, you tell it straight. From beginning to end. No pieces missing." Inside the shed, the 3 intruders glared up, wrists bound behind them, mouths gagged with torn cloth. Their faces were swollen with bruises, their bodies slack with exhaustion. Morgan squatted, tugged the gag from the first man's mouth. "Name," he ordered. The man spat blood to the dirt. "Nobody you need to know." Morgan's tone never shifted. He moved down the line, repeating the question, jotting notes, asking where they were from, who sent them what they wanted. Each answer was the same silence or some vague mutter about scrap metal. Morgan stood, eyes narrowing. His gaze drifted to the boots of the second man, the thick sole patterned with a sawtooth tread. He thought of the prints on the ridge. There was a 4th, Morgan said, more to himself than anyone else. And he knew his way around this land. Eli nodded. "I saw him last night. Just a silhouette on the hill. Watching." Morgan's jaw tightened. "Then I know who I need to call. There's a trail camera up by the North Ridge. Belongs to the Forestry Service. We'll see what it caught." They stepped outside into the pale morning. Morgan removed his hat, letting the cool air touch his head. He turned to Eli, his expression heavier than before. "It's time we talk about your father." Eli's chest constricted. He had lived under Thomas Carter's shadow for years, the man's silences, his failures, his debts. What could Morgan possibly add? The sheriff began slowly, voice even. "Back in the 70s, after the Oak Hollow bank robbery, the whole county went hunting. 3 men vanished. One of them was a hand who'd worked summers here on Carter Ranch." Eli's pulse quickened. "Your father found him the night after," Morgan continued. "Storm was breaking, rain everywhere. The man was bleeding half dead, dragging a steel chest. Thomas took him in. Out of old loyalty, maybe out of desperation, your father had debts hanging over his head. He let that man hide the chest in his barn." Eli closed his eyes. The image fit too well with the fragments he'd always wondered about. When dawn came, Morgan said the man was gone. His partners were found dead, fleeing toward the canyon. And that chest stayed behind like a snare. Morgan's voice dropped. "I came to the ranch myself. Questioned Thomas. He denied everything, but I saw it in his eyes. Later, after too much whiskey, he confessed. Said he hadn't dared turn it in, afraid of being branded a conspirator, afraid it would ruin the family. So he carried that sin like a stone for the rest of his life." Eli's throat burned. "Your father tried to make amends," Morgan said softly. "Small sums from the chest went into anonymous payments, helping widows of the robbery, fixing the church roof, seeding the town's relief fund. He thought no one knew. But the guilt never left him. One night he told me, 'I'll leave the choice to the one child who still knows shame and knows how to keep a promise.' Morgan's eyes fixed on Eli. I think he meant you. Eli staggered back, gripping the porch post. The weight of it crushed down his father's secret, his penance, the legacy he had unknowingly inherited. Morgan's voice hardened. Marcus and Clara aren't blind. They saw things. Clara found papers, an old newspaper clipping, anonymous bank slips. Marcus got in bed with Harlan Briggs last year, buying land along the road. Briggs sent men to scout. They knew something was buried here. They thought you'd break and sell. Then they'd dig it out themselves? Eli clenched his fists until his nails bit his palms. So the rumors about me losing the ranch weren't rumors at all. Morgan said, they seeded them to set up a legal excuse to strip you of this place, paint you unstable, push you out. The pieces clicked together, the watchers in the dark, the whispers in town, the men who came last night. Morgan laid the truth plain. That chest is evidence. By law, it belongs in county hands. After so many years, maybe no criminal charge will stick. But the money, it still carries obligation. Civil restitution, moral restitution. Families never saw justice. Eli swallowed hard. You have two roads, Morgan said, his voice clear. One handed over to the county now. We'll build a restitution fund with the bank. I can request your name be kept sealed. 2, we seal it here under my badge photograph and signed chain of custody. Then we bring in auditors, handle it slow and clean. But you can't sit on it alone anymore. If you do, men like Briggs will hound you until either the chest is gone or you are. Morgan glanced at Dusty grazing by the fence. That horse didn't bring you this far so you could sit guarding gold. He brought you here to put it to rest. Eli looked over the ranch, half-fallen fences, a house beaten by time, but still his blood, his inheritance. He thought of his father, too proud and too ashamed to do the right thing. And he thought of Luke Dawson, his friend gone because of secrets. The chest had already claimed a life. Eli straightened shoulders, squaring. I won't sell this land, but I won't hide the chest either. We'll do it clean, all the way. Morgan studied him a moment, then nodded. That's the choice Thomas never had the backbone to finish. Maybe you do. By noon, Morgan's deputies arrived to haul the 3 intruders to town, booking them on trespass and assault. Eli walked Morgan to the ridge where the extra tracks cut through the soil. Together, they marked the site for the Forestry Service cameras. If the 4th man was caught on film, they'd know soon enough. Back at the barn, they lifted the chest from its hiding place. Its iron sides were scarred with rust, its lock pitted but intact. Morgan sealed it with a sheriff's tag-snapped photographs, logged every detail. No more shadows, Morgan said. Chain of custody starts now. In the week ahead, Eli would face meetings with the Oak Hollow bank lawyers' auditors. He would patch every legal crack Marcus had tried to widen: land taxes, water rights, property deeds. For now, he told no one outside the circle. If townsfolk asked, he gave only one answer: Carter Ranch is under repair. When Morgan mounted his truck to leave, he paused. His hand gripped Eli's shoulder. His eyes were weary but steady. I owed your father advice I never gave, the sheriff said. So I'll give it to you. Walking straight makes fewer friends, but it lets you sleep at night. Eli nodded slowly, Dusty stepping close as if to listen too. I'll take straight, Eli said quietly. I've had enough of shadows. The afternoon lay heavy over Carter Ranch, the kind of stillness that pressed into the bones. After Sheriff Morgan left, Eli had tried to lose himself in work. He carried fresh boards to mend the sagging fence along the south pasture hammer, in hand sweat running down his temples. But the silence nagged at him. Normally, the sparrows flitted from post to post, filling the air with chatter. Today, the fields were hushed unnaturally so. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. Eli leaned his hammer against the fence rail and straightened. Something in the pit of his stomach tightened. He turned toward the barn. "Dusty," he called, voice cutting through the still air. No answering nicker. He strode quickly across the yard, boots pounding the dust. The barn door hung ajar. Inside, shafts of light cut through gaps in the boards, but the stall was empty. The rope halter hung unused on its hook. Straw lay scattered across the ground, scuffed and trampled. Eli's breath caught. A hollow ache bloomed in his chest. Dusty never wandered off. Not once. The gelding always lingered near, never strayed beyond earshot. "Dusty doesn't just leave," Eli whispered. The words felt brittle in his mouth, like something breaking. He forced himself to slow, scanning the ground, like Morgan had taught him long ago. Near the stall, hoof prints crisscrossed in a frantic mess, circling tight as if Dusty had fought. The earth bore long, rough grooves, dragging marks where something or someone had pulled. Kneeling, Eli's fingers brushed a torn rope, end fibers frayed from a hurried cut. The knot scars along the length told the story, tied fast, then ripped away. Beyond the fence line, the dirt changed. Fresh tire tracks carved deep into the soft earth, heavier than the occasional ranch traffic. He crouched, palm pressing against the tread mark. Still damp. Recent. A flash of color caught his eye. Half buried in the grass lay a strip of leather, red slick worn smooth from use. Eli lifted it, recognizing instantly what it was: a tie strap from a saddle. Not his. Not from Carter Ranch. His jaw clenched until it ached. They took him. Eli's chest tightened further when he spotted a folded scrap of paper wedged in the stall slats. He pulled it free, unfolding with stiff fingers. The handwriting sprawled crude and jagged: "Bring the treasure to the sawmill barn. 1 hour. If not, the horse won't be whole when you see it again." No signature. No hint of a hand. Only the blunt cruelty of the threat. The paper trembled in Eli's grip. His vision darkened at the edges. "They dare..." His voice was rough, shaking with fury. He turned the note over again and again, though there was nothing more to see. Only those who knew about the chest would dare write such words. His father's secret wasn't town gossip, not yet. Only a handful of people could possibly wield it. Eli's thoughts went back to the morning with Morgan, Marcus, and Clara. Of course, they had known pieces of the story for years. They had waited, schemed, and finally struck when the time was right. He could almost see their faces, Clara's cold smile lips pressed tight, as if pleased by his suffering. Marcus's eyes glinting with greed, the same hunger he'd seen when they haggled over land. His hand tightened around the note until it crumpled. "Family," he whispered bitterly. "Blood, and yet they do this." The rage burned hot. But beneath it lived fear. He paced the yard, boots kicking dust breaths short. His hands trembled with the weight of it, fear for Dusty, anger at what they threatened. He remembered the night not long past when Dusty had thrown his weight against the intruders in the dark, knocking one down and giving Eli the chance to fight back. The horse had never faltered, never failed him. Loyal, steady, brave. Now Dusty was somewhere tied and struggling, perhaps already hurt. The thought crushed Eli's chest. He dug his nails into his palms until they left crescents of pain. "If they harm you," Eli murmured, voice breaking, "I swear I won't forgive. I won't let them live easy another day." He seized a length of rope and wound it around his wrist as if anchoring himself. Dusty had always been more than a horse. He was the last living bridge to Thomas Carter, the one creature who had carried Eli through loss after loss. The chest still sat beneath the floorboards in the barn, where Eli and Morgan had sealed it. Eli pried it loose, sweat running down his back. He stared at the dull gleam of the gold and the brittle stacks of yellowed paper. To carry it whole meant surrendering everything into Marcus and Clara's hands. To refuse meant condemning Dusty to pain or worse. He ground his teeth, mind racing. There had to be another way. Eli pulled a worn saddlebag from the tack shelf. He placed a few real bars inside, enough to rattle with convincing weight, then stuffed the rest with bundled scraps of newspaper and torn ledger sheets. He tucked the true remainder back into the chest, sealing it under boards once more. It wasn't perfect, but it would buy him time. He strapped the bag shut, then gathered what tools he had, his father's old hunting knife, sharp despite its age. A storm lantern, its glass smudged but serviceable. And a short-handled spade he slipped through a belt loop. Finally, he shrugged into a thick canvas coat, the bag hidden beneath. He paused at the shelf where Thomas's photograph sat in its cracked frame. His father stared back in black and white, stern, haunted eyes, forever locked in penance. Eli touched the glass. "I won't let them break what you left," he whispered. "Not the land, not the name, not Dusty." The sawmill barn lay 2 miles north, tucked in the shadows of pine woods that had reclaimed the old logging grounds. Eli set out along the rutted path as the sun drooped toward the horizon. The road was rough, strewn with roots and stones. Each step ground grit beneath his boots. He carried the lantern unlit, holding the bag close, every nerve wound tight. Shadows lengthened. The forest closed in around him, tall pines blotting out the last of the day. Somewhere above, a flock of crows wheeled against the fading sky, their calls harsh and grating, a ragged chorus that clawed at his nerves. He kept walking, jaw set, listening to every stir of leaves and crack of branch. The weight in his chest grew with each step. He would face them. He had no choice. By the time the barn came into view, twilight had deepened. The building crouched in the clearing, a skeleton of timber and rot. Its roof sagged where storms had chewed holes. Weeds tangled the foundation. Yet from within, light spilled thin ribbons of yellow, seeping through warped slats. Lanterns, or perhaps a single lamp. Proof that someone waited. Eli halted at the tree line, breath caught in his throat. The night was alive with a drone of crickets, but beneath it came another sound. A hollow thud. Hooves striking wood. Dusty. The horse's restless blows echoed inside the barn, the rhythm jagged with fear. Eli closed his eyes briefly, exhaling hard. His heart pounded like a drum. "I'm here, old friend." Eli stepped forward, shoulders squared, though the weight of the saddlebag dragged at him. The false treasure clinked inside with every movement, each sound echoing like a death knell in his ears. His hand brushed the handle of his spade, the blade worn smooth, but still sturdy. Inside the barn, Dusty stood tethered to a beam. Rope bound his neck and flanks, and a rag gagged his muzzle. The old gelding trembled, sweat shining on his hide, but his eyes lit up when he saw Eli, an ember of spirit that hadn't gone out. Dusty Eli breathed, but the word was swallowed by the night. Marcus emerged from the shadows. He stood in the center of the barn, arms folded chin high, a smug grin curling across his face. His boots crunched over sawdust as he advanced into the light. "So you came," Marcus drawled. "Always knew you would. After all, you were never more than a keeper, Eli. A mule carrying father's burden." Clara slipped into view beside him, her face pale in the floodlight. Her arms crossed her eyes, glinting with cold amusement. Behind them, 4 men stood, scattered across the barn faces, hidden by scarves, weapons, glinting dull in the firelight. "Bring me the bag," Marcus commanded, voice sharp. "Hand it over, and maybe you'll walk out with your horse." Clara tilted her head, lips twisting in disdain. "If you walk out at all." Eli stepped further inside boots, creaking on the warped planks. He set the bag down slowly at his feet, his gaze fixed on Marcus. His voice carried steady despite the pounding of his heart. "This isn't yours," he said. "It isn't mine either. It's Father's name. His burden? His mistake, maybe, but not a prize for scavengers." Marcus's eyes narrowed, his grin fading into a sneer. He glanced toward Dusty. Father was weak. He hid behind words like honor. "And now you repeat them like a fool." "History repeats itself, Eli. You'll die clinging to ideals while I take what matters." Marcus strode forward and crouched by the bag, fingers fumbling with the strap. At that moment, Eli shifted subtly, boot pressing against the stall beam. Hidden by his coat sleeve, his hand slipped to his boot, drawing out the slim blade he had concealed. He dropped to one knee near Dusty, the angle shielding his motion. With swift precision, he sawed at the ropes binding Dusty's neck. The gelding twitched, but held still, ears flicking as though he knew. "Easy boy," Eli whispered so faint it was swallowed by the generator's hum. One more second. Marcus tugged open the bag eyes, hungry for gleam. At the same instant, Eli cut the final rope strand. Dusty's head jerked free, muscles quivering. Eli rose to his full height and bellowed across the barn. "Now try and take me." He yanked the last knot loose. Dusty lunged forward with a scream rope, whipping free, hooves striking sparks from the wood. In one motion, Eli swung himself onto Dusty's bare back, ripping the gag free from the horse's mouth. Dusty reared wild and furious, and then surged forward like a storm breaking. "Stop them!" Marcus roared, his voice cracking with sudden panic. The floodlight flared behind, throwing a long shadow of man and a horse that stretched across the barn like a phantom charge. Dust rose in clouds beneath Dusty's hooves, the boards rattling under his thunder. One of the hired men lunged forward, swinging a length of chain. Eli met him with the haft of his spade, swinging sideways. The blow cracked against the man's shoulder, sending him sprawling with a shout. Chaos erupted. Dusty barreled into a stack of planks, sending them toppling in an avalanche that cut off two of the thugs near the doorway. Wood crashed and splintered the air, filling with choking sawdust. Another man rushed, knife raised. Eli whipped his rope-free lasso, circling in the dim light. He cast it true, the loop snapping around the man's neck. One yank sent him slamming face first into the boards. Clara stepped forward, then her hand snapping a whip from her belt. She cracked it across the barn, the sound like a pistol shot. Dusty jerked sideways, narrowly avoiding the strike. Clara's eyes glittered as she swung again, but the horse twisted shoulders, slamming into a post. The impact shook the frame. A lantern slipped from its hook and shattered on the floor. Flame licked eagerly across spilled oil, climbing the dry wood. The barn filled with light, the angry, flickering glow of fire. Men shouted, stumbling as smoke thickened. Marcus shoved one aside and pulled a pistol from inside his jacket. His hand trembled, but his voice cut sharp above the chaos. "Enough, stop or the horse dies first." The muzzle pointed directly at Dusty's chest. Eli reined Dusty in sharply, turning to face his brother. Their eyes locked across the storm of fire and dust. "You'd kill the only creature that ever trusted either of us?" Eli asked, voice low and seething. Marcus's lips curled. "Money is blood, Eli. Blood is all that matters. Family honor just walls in the way." Eli leaned forward, teeth gritted. "You were my brother. Now you're just hollow greed wearing his face." With a shout, Eli drove his heels into Dusty's sides. The gelding leapt. At the same moment, Marcus fired. The bullet ripped through the air, splintering the beam inches from Dusty's head. Eli swung the spade like a club, smashing against Marcus's wrist. The pistol flew from his grip and clattered into the firelight. Clara shrieked with fury, seizing her chance. She circled behind the chaos, a knife flashing in her hand. With silent speed, she lunged for Eli's back. But Dusty felt her first. The horse reared suddenly, hooves pounding against the crossbeam overhead. The vibration shook loose a cascade of dust and splinters. Clara stumbled as wood rained down. Eli twisted spade haft, intercepting the downward slash. Steel screeched against wood. Clara's face twisted in the glow of the fire, half lit, half shadowed. "You're not the sister I knew," Eli spat. Her laugh was jagged, cruel. That sister never existed, only the survivor. They pressed blade against haft until sparks leapt between. Around them the barn groaned as flames climbed the walls. The fire leapt higher, devouring hay and timber alike. Smoke choked the air. Dusty reared again, striking with hooves, sending one of the last thugs sprawling into the corner. Panic spread among the men. One dropped his crowbar and bolted through the flames. Another cursed and clawed at the burning walls before fleeing into the night. Marcus staggered to his knees, coughing, eyes wild in the red haze. "Don't let him escape. Bring me the gold," he shouted hoarsely. But his men were gone. Only Clara stood, knife-still, raised eyes burning with hate. Eli yanked Dusty around, driving the horse toward the narrow side door. A thug leapt to block the way, but Dusty struck him down with a brutal kick. The man crashed into the boards with a scream and didn't rise. Eli drove Dusty forward again. With a splintering crash, the geldings shouldered through the weakened planks. Flames curled at their heels as they burst into the cool night air. Behind them, the barn roared like a furnace. The roof groaned, then collapsed inward with a thunderous crash. Sparks shot into the sky, carried upward on smoke. Eli didn't stop until they were clear of the clearing trees closing behind them like a shield. Only then did he rein Dusty to a halt, chest, heaving, eyes burning from smoke. Dusty stood trembling, but alive beneath him, sweat darkening his hide. Eli leaned forward, wrapping his arms around the gelding's neck. "You did it, boy," he whispered, voice raw. "We made it out." From the dirt road cutting into the clearing came new light, steady, disciplined beams, not the erratic glow of fire. Lanterns bobbed. Flashlights cut across the trees. The sound of boots crunching gravel filled the silence left between each roar of collapsing timber. "Hold it right there," a commanding voice thundered. Sheriff Morgan strode forward, his broad hat shadowing his weathered face, revolver gripped steady in one hand. Behind him came 2 deputies and a dozen townsfolk, pressed into service as a makeshift militia. Some carried rifles, others only axes or shotguns, but their formation was tight, their eyes hard. Eli pulled Dusty to a halt at the edge of the floodlight. The gelding pawed the ground, nostrils flaring, sweat steaming from his flanks. From the ruined barn staggered Clara, coughing and blackened with soot. Marcus followed, face twisted in rage, his shirt-scorched, eyes wild from smoke and failure. 2 of their hired men stumbled after them, one clutching a bleeding arm, the other limping heavily. The villagers gasped at the sight, Eli astride the weary horse, the barn an inferno at his back, and Marcus and Clara stumbling from the wreckage like criminals caught in their own trap. Morgan raised his voice again, cutting through the clamor, "Drop your weapons." Nobody moves another step. Deputies rushed forward, iron cuffs ready. Clara's composure cracked at last. She screamed, voice hoarse from smoke, "He tricked you all. The gold belongs to me. He's hiding it." Marcus jerked against the deputy's grip, spit flying. "I'm the eldest son. It's mine by right, damn you. He stole it." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some shocked, some muttering agreement, others shaking their heads. But Sheriff Morgan stood solid, his voice slicing through. Enough. Both of you are under arrest. Kidnapping, arson, attempted murder. Blood runs deeper than gold, but the law runs deeper than both. Clara shrieked again, thrashing in her bonds. Marcus snarled like a trapped wolf, but the deputies twisted his arms back until he hissed with pain. Eli slid down from Dusty's back boots, hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. He stood a moment, chest heaving, watching the two faces that had once been his family faces, now warped by greed and smoke. His gut twisted with something between grief and relief. They were my kin, he muttered almost to himself. And now they're strangers. Morgan gave him a steady look, softer than his tone. Blood's complicated son. But tonight, truth came out plain enough. When the flames had begun to smolder into embers, Morgan turned to Eli again. We'll need the real chest, Carter. Bring it into the light. The words cut through Eli like a cold wind. He had hoped perhaps to delay to keep that secret one more day. But the law stood here now, and the eyes of Oak Hollow with it. Come with me. Eli set his voice steady. He led them back along the trail, Dusty walking beside him as if nothing could part them again. The militia followed in silence, lanterns bobbing through the trees. The townsfolk trailed behind, curiosity buzzing like hornets. At Carter Ranch, Eli stopped beside the old collapsed horse shed. He knelt in the dirt, hands steady though his chest pounded. With his spade, he dug where the earth had already been loosened. The crowd pressed in, whispering as the iron-bound chest came into view. Eli heaved it up, set it on the ground, and drew back the latch. The hinges groaned. Inside, the truth gleamed gold bars, dulled with age stacks of weathered banknotes and packets of documents stamped with the names of banks long collapsed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some drew closer, eyes wide, while others crossed themselves as if staring at a ghost. Sheriff Morgan crouched, lifting one packet of papers. His lined face hardened as he read. Then he straightened, his voice solemn. This here is evidence, 40 years worth. Carter gold tied to the Oak Hollow bank heist. Stolen lives, stolen futures. Looks like the past finally dug itself up. The crowd erupted into talk, some scandalized, others nodding, old rumors vindicated at last. Eli stood silent at the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders, heavier than any chain. Morning came gray and cool. Officials from the county arrived, their wagons rattling into Oak Hollow. With them came two representatives of the very bank whose vault had once been robbed. They wore stiff suits, carried folders thick with yellowed ledgers, and wasted no time. In the town hall, they examined each bar of gold, each crumbling bill, every stained paper. Clerks scribbled notes, lips tight, as they compared serial numbers to dusty records. At last the verdict came. The Carter hoard was indeed the missing fortune. From the robbery that had haunted Oak Hollow for generations. Legally, it belonged not to any family, but to the state to settle debts never paid. And yet, time had worked its own strange justice. Many of the victims had died, and their families scattered. The law could not turn back decades, nor unspend what had already been lost. So the court ruled most of the treasure would be reclaimed, filed into state accounts, a portion symbolic returned to the bank. But a significant share, $5 million by final reckoning, would remain with Eli Carter, the one who uncovered it, the one who bore the burden into daylight. Sheriff Morgan clasped Eli's shoulder outside the hall, voice rough but kind. Your father left a mess, but you, son, you turned it into a reckoning. That's worth more than gold. Eli could not answer. His throat had tightened too much. Not all in Oak Hollow rejoiced. Some muttered in the saloon that night. A poor rancher stumbles into fortune while the rest of us scrape by. Where's the fairness in that one spat? Another shook his head. Man's just lucky, that's all. But others answered with fire. Lucky, said an old farmer, his voice hoarse. He faced his own blood in that burning barn, nearly died for it. That ain't luck, it's grit. And slowly as days passed, the town's mood shifted. People remembered how Eli had stood firm, how he had risked himself for a horse most thought worthless, how he had not run when Marcus and Clara schemed in shadows. They remembered the smoke-blackened night when the barn fell, and how Eli rode out of the fire astride the one beast no one else would have bothered saving. One by one, greetings in the street turned warmer. Hats tipped, hands offered where once there had been turned shoulders. At the ranch, neighbors came to mend fences, to bring timber and nails to help raise Carter Ranch from ruin. No longer an eyesore, it began to stand proud again, a place of promise. Eli said little of his fortune. He lived simple still, his boots worn, his jacket patched. When asked, he only shrugged. It wasn't me. Dusty led the way. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Oak Hollow had seen in decades. Where once Carter Ranch had been a husk, its fences leaning its fields swallowed by weeds, hammers now rang out saws, sang through timber, and laughter carried on the wind. With the share of wealth deemed lawfully his, Eli poured himself into rebuilding not only his home, but the very heart of his family's story. The old wooden house, which for years had sat weather-beaten and gray, rose again with fresh life. Its walls were mended, sanded smooth, and coated in bright white paint that gleamed beneath the sun. The sagging roof was replaced with new shingles red, as a cardinal's wing glowing warmly in the daylight. Smoke curled from the chimney in the cool morning's proof that the hearth inside burned strong again. The horse barns, once collapsed under their own rot, were rebuilt wide and sturdy, their stalls lined with fresh hay water troughs filled with clear spring water. The smell of cut lumber mingled with the scent of clean straw. Across the pastures, white fences ran in neat, even lines, stretching where thistles and nettles had once choked the ground. What had begun as Eli's personal labor became a town affair. Men from the saloon came with tool belts slung over their shoulders. Women brought paintbrushes and baskets of food for the workers. Children carried nails in pockets and chased one another through the grass. Each day more hands pitched in. Oak Hollow, once divided by suspicion, seemed knit together again by sweat and effort. By the month's end, Carter Ranch was no longer a stain on the town's memory. It stood as a new emblem of survival, of hope of second chances. At the ranch's gate, Eli erected a great wooden sign, the letters carved deep by his own hands. The townsfolk gathered the day he raised it. The sign read, Carter and Dawson Memorial Ranch, a place to begin again. The name Carter honored his blood, his father, and even the tangled history he could not erase. The name Dawson was for Luke Dawson, the friend who had once believed in the treasure whose life had ended before its truth could be brought to light. Together, their names marked not just the weight of the past, but the meaning of what the ranch could stand for now. People stopped at the gate, reading in silence. A few dabbed at their eyes. Some murmured to themselves, others nodded as if at last the restless ghosts of Oak Hollow could rest. Sheriff Morgan, standing with arms folded, said softly, so only Eli heard, a place to begin again. That means more than gold ever could. Eli bowed his head. For the first time, he felt the words were true. But Eli did not hoard what fortune he had. He had seen what greed did to Marcus and Clara. He had seen how gold twisted souls until nothing remained but hunger. So he resolved that his legacy would be different. He began by seeking out the poorest men in Oak Hollow, the drifters, the broke cowhands, the ones who had lost their stock to illness or drought. To each he gave what he could, a pair of calves, a pouch of seed, or honest work on the ranch at a fair wage. Men who had once mocked him as the beggar cowboy now came to shake his hand with tears in their eyes. Proud men who never thought they would accept another's help now tipped their hats in whispered gratitude. One bent-backed elder, clutching the reins of the mare Eli had given him, rasped, "There's never been a Carter who gave instead of taking, until now." And Oak Hollow began to change. Fields grew green again, not just at Carter Ranch, but across the valley. Neighbors shared equipment, exchanged seed, and lent one another horses. Suspicion gave way to fellowship and hunger to plenty. Eli's most daring idea was yet to come. He opened the ranch gates for a program no one had dreamed of before, a school of sorts, where children and young cowboys could learn not just to ride, but to understand the spirit of the horse. Dusty, grizzled, and scarred, became the star of it. Too old for races or long trails, the gelding still carried a patience that no other horse could match. Under Eli's watch, children climbed onto Dusty's back, their legs barely reaching his sides. The horse walked slowly, steady as the sunrise, never startling, never unkind. He was more than an animal, he was a teacher. Eli told the youngsters, a true cowboy ain't measured by how many horses he owns, but by how he treats the one that carries him. The children listened, their small hands pressed to Dusty's warm hide, their laughter rising like bells as they learned. Even the rougher boys, who once tugged reins and kicked impatiently, found themselves gentled by the gelding's steady steps. Carter Ranch, once cursed by whispers of hidden treasure, became a place where hope itself was raised and broken spirits found new strength. Through it all, Eli and Dusty remained inseparable. Each dawn before the workers arrived, Eli saddled no horse but Dusty and walked the fields. They breathed in the cold morning air together, the mist rolling low over the grass. Dusty's pace was slow, but he never lagged, always beside Eli, as though tethered not by reins, but by something deeper, trust. At the fence line, Eli often paused, fingers running through the gelding's rough mane. His voice would drop to a whisper, meant only for Dusty. "If it weren't for you, none of this would stand. You carried me through fire. You carried me through blood. You carried me home." Word spread through Oak Hollow, and beyond, the old horse was no longer just an animal. He was a living legend. People spoke of Dusty with reverence, pointing him out to strangers as though showing them a sacred relic. The changes reached further than Carter Ranch. Oak Hollow itself shifted like soil turned fresh by rain. The saloon, once thick with gossip and scorn, now hummed with plans for trade and partnership. Men spoke less of grudges, more of cattle prices, hay harvests, and fence lines. On Sundays, families came to Carter Ranch for gatherings, sharing food, music, and stories. Cowboys, once bitter rivals, now taught one another tricks of horsemanship, swapping lessons instead of insults. What had begun with one man's struggle became the town's rebirth. And soon, folks from neighboring towns began to whisper about Oak Hollow, not as a place of crime and forgotten gold, but as the town that started again. One evening, when the sky burned orange and the fields glowed like they'd been gilded, Eli stood on the porch of his newly rebuilt home. The white wood gleamed in the fading sun, the red roof catching fire in the light. Dusty stood beside him, ears flicking lazily, his eyes half-lidded, but deep as wells of memory. The air was filled with the sigh of tall grass, moving in slow waves as the wind passed through. Eli rested his hand on the gelding's neck. His voice was low, steady, but filled with the weight of years. "We did it, old friend. Against all odds, we did it." Dusty lifted his head, gave a soft whinny that rose and carried across the pasture. The sound merged with the whisper of the wind, like an answer older than words. And as if the moment had been waiting for witness, the horizon shifted. A group of boys rode across the far field, their ponies kicking up dust, their laughter rolling like thunder through the valley. They were young, wild, and full of beginnings. Eli smiled faintly as he watched them. He knew then with unshakable certainty that Carter Ranch was no longer just his. It belonged to them, to the children, to the future of Oak Hollow. The gold was gone, but something greater had replaced it. Legacy was not in coins stacked or bars stored. Legacy was in land rebuilt in neighbors, lifted in horses trained and children taught. Legacy was in the way Dusty still walked beside him, steady as ever. The sun slid lower, painting the fields in scarlet and gold. The day closed, but the future stretched open like the endless horizon. Carter Ranch stood not as the end of a story, but the beginning of one.